Welcome to Wisdom-Trek with Gramps. I am Guthrie Chamberlain, and we are on day 2,810 of our trek. The purpose of Wisdom-Trek is to create a legacy of wisdom, to seek out discernment and insights, and to boldly grow where few have chosen to grow before. The title for today's Wisdom-Trek is The Eternal Refuge, Stepping into the Wide Open Spaces. In our previous trek, we stood on the mountaintop of Psalm 117. We explored the shortest chapter in the entire Bible, and yet we saw how it held the largest possible stage. It was a cosmic megaphone, calling all the disinherited nations and all the diverse people groups of the earth to return to their Creator. It reminded us that God's unfailing love is a prevailing flood, capable of washing over every cultural and geographical boundary. Today, we take our next momentous step. We are crossing the threshold into Psalm 118, and we will be focusing our attention on the first movement of this incredible song, covering verses 1 through 9 in the New Living Translation. This is a milestone moment in our journey. Psalm 118 is the grand finale, the sweeping crescendo of the Egyptian Hallel. This is the very last of the Passover Psalms. When you picture Jesus and his disciples in the upper room, finishing the Last Supper, the Gospel of Matthew tells us that they sang a hymn before heading out to the Mount of Olives. This was that hymn. These were the very words that filled the mind of the Messiah as he walked deliberately toward the darkness of Gethsemane and the agony of the cross. As we read this psalm, we hear the sound of a massive, festive procession. We hear a worship leader crying out to the congregation, and we hear a deeply personal testimony of a leader who was surrounded by enemies, yet rescued by the overwhelming power of Yahweh. So, let us join the procession and listen to the opening chorus. The first segment is the chorus of unfailing love. Psalm 118, verses 1 through 4. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His faithful love endures forever. Let all Israel repeat, his faithful love endures forever. Let Aaron's descendants, the priests, repeat, his faithful love endures forever. Let all who fear the Lord repeat, his faithful love endures forever. The psalm erupts with a joyful, booming command. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. But this is not just a solo performance. The worship leader is actively conducting a massive multi-part choir stationed within the temple courts. He calls out to 3 specific, distinct groups, demanding that they lift their voices and repeat the core thesis of the entire biblical narrative. His faithful love endures forever. If this grouping sounds familiar, it should. We saw this exact same 3-part division back in Psalm 115. First, the leader calls out to all Israel. These are the covenant people, the physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They are the ones who experienced the Exodus, the parting of the Red Sea, and the provision of manna in the wilderness. They, of all people, have the historical evidence to shout that God's faithful love endures. Next, he turns to Aaron's descendants, the priests. These are the spiritual leaders, the men who mediated between the holy God and the flawed nation. They worked the sacrifices. They saw the blood on the altar. They understood, intimately, the cost of forgiveness. They are commanded to publicly declare that the sacrificial system is upheld not by mechanics, but by God's enduring love. Finally, the leader casts a wide net to all who fear the Lord. This encompasses the Gentile converts, the foreigners, and the strangers from those diverse nations we talked about in Psalm 117. God's love is not geographically restricted. If you fear Yahweh, if you revere the Creator of the universe, you are invited into the choir. You are given a voice in the congregation. And what is the lyric they are all singing? It is the Hebrew word hesed. This is God's loyal, stubborn, covenant-keeping affection. It is a love that does not quit when we fail. It is a love that outlasts empires, survives the darkness of the grave, and, as the psalm says, endures forever. When Jesus walked toward the cross, he was holding onto this exact promise. The physical pain would be temporary, but the hesed of the Father would be eternal. The second segment is the cry from the narrow place. Psalm 118, verse 5. In my distress I prayed to the Lord, and the Lord answered me and set me free. Suddenly, the perspective shifts. The sweeping, panoramic view of the massive choir fades into the background, and a single, solitary voice steps up to the microphone. The worship leader, perhaps the king, or perhaps a representation of the Messiah, shares a deeply personal testimony. In my distress, I prayed to the Lord. The Hebrew word translated as distress is metzar. It literally means a narrow, tight, or constricted place. It paints a vivid, suffocating picture. Have you ever felt trapped? Have you ever felt like the walls of your life, your finances, your health, your relationships were closing in on you, squeezing the very breath out of your lungs? That is the metzar. It is the spiritual claustrophobia of a crisis. The psalmist was pushed into a corner with no human escape route, but in that tight, suffocating space, he did the only thing left to do. He prayed, he cried out to Yahweh, and the response of God is breathtaking. The Lord answered me and set me free. The literal Hebrew translation is incredibly poetic. It says, the Lord answered me in a broad place, or in a spacious place. God did not just pluck him out of the tight squeeze. God completely changed his environment. He moved him from the suffocating, narrow gorge of distress and planted his feet in a wide, expansive, sunlit meadow of freedom. This is what Yahweh does. He takes our claustrophobic anxieties and replaces them with the wide open spaces of his grace. He gives us room to breathe again. The third segment is the fearless stance of the redeemed. Psalm 118, verses 6 through 7. The Lord is for me, so I will have no fear. What can mere people do to me? Yes, the Lord is for me. He will help me. I will look in triumph at those who hate me. Because the psalmist has experienced this miraculous transfer from the narrow place to the spacious place, his entire psychological posture has changed. He stands tall, squares his shoulders, and makes a bold, defiant declaration. The Lord is for me, so I will have no fear. This is the ultimate antidote to anxiety. If the maker of heaven and earth, the commander of the divine council, is actively standing on your side, fear becomes logically obsolete. He asks a rhetorical question. What can mere people do to me? When we look at this through the lens of the ancient Israelite worldview, we understand that mere people are often pawns. Behind hostile human armies and corrupt human politicians, there are often dark, rebellious spiritual forces at work. The psalmist knows that he is not just fighting flesh and blood. But even so, if the Most High God, the uncreated Creator, is his helper, then the rebel gods and their human puppets are entirely powerless to change his eternal destiny. What can mere people do to me? They might insult me, they might steal my property, they might even, as Jesus knew, destroy my physical body. But they cannot touch my soul, and they cannot alter the enduring, forever nature of God's hesed toward me. He repeats the truth to let it sink in deep. Yes, the Lord is for me. He will help me. The word for help here means to actively assist in battle. God is not a passive observer. He is a fellow warrior in the trenches. Because of this divine alliance, the psalmist is certain of the outcome. I will look in triumph at those who hate me. He doesn't say he will seek bitter, petty revenge. He says he will look in triumph. He will stand in the wide open space of God's deliverance, and he will see the hostile, chaotic forces of his enemies completely neutralized. The fourth segment is the superiority of the divine refuge. Psalm 118, verses 8 through 9. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in people. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in princes. The psalmist concludes this opening section by drawing a sharp, proverbial contrast. He distills his entire life experience, the terror of the narrow place, and the joy of the spacious place into a timeless piece of wisdom. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in people. Human beings are fragile, fickle, and flawed. Even the best of friends and the most well-meaning family members have limitations. They get tired. They get distracted. They misunderstand us. If you build the foundation of your ultimate security on the approval or the assistance of mortal humans, you are building on shifting sand. People will inevitably disappoint you, not always out of malice, but simply out of their own inherent weakness. But the psalmist takes it a step further. He scales up the human hierarchy. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in princes. In the ancient world, princes and kings were the ultimate source of earthly security. They controlled the armies, they managed the economy, and they forged the treaties. Nations survived or perished based on the strength of their princes. Furthermore, in the cosmic geography of the ancient Near East, human princes were often viewed as the earthly representatives of the patron gods of their nations. To trust in a foreign prince was to align yourself with a foreign deity. The psalmist emphatically rejects this. He says, do not put your hope in the political systems of this world. Do not place your ultimate trust in the government, in military alliances, or in wealthy benefactors. Princes rise and princes fall. Empires crumble to dust. The political landscape changes with the wind. Taking refuge implies seeking shelter from a deadly storm. When the storm of life hits, when the arrows of the enemy are flying, and the narrow places are closing in, a human prince cannot save your soul. A politician cannot offer you eternal life. It is infinitely better, wiser, and safer to run into the strong tower of the name of Yahweh. He is the only refuge whose walls cannot be breached. He is the only king whose throne is never threatened. Psalm 118, verses 1 through 9, serves as a powerful spiritual recalibration for our lives. It challenges us to listen to the great choir of history and add our own voices to the chorus. His faithful love endures forever. It validates the very real pain of our narrow places, but it promises us that when we cry out, God has wide, open, spacious places prepared for our rescue. And most importantly, it forces us to audit our trust. Are we looking to mere people for our validation? Are we hoping that a new prince, a new leader, or a new system will save us? True wisdom recognizes that the only secure shelter in the cosmos is the Creator himself. If the Lord is for you, you truly have nothing to fear. If you found this podcast insightful, please subscribe and leave us a review, then encourage your friends and family to join us, and come along tomorrow for another day of Wisdom Trek, creating a legacy. Thank you so much for allowing me to be your guide, mentor, and, most importantly, I am your friend as I serve you through this Wisdom Trek podcast and journal. As we take this trek of life together, let us always live abundantly, love unconditionally, listen intentionally, learn continuously, lend to others generously, lead with integrity. Leave a living legacy each day. I am Guthrie Chamberlain, reminding you to keep moving forward, enjoy your journey, and create a great day every day. See you next time for more daily wisdom.